Hello and welcome to episode 53 of the Virtual Velo Podcast with me, Emma Martin, and my co-host, Chris Schwenker. Over the last couple of shows, we've heard from e-cycling athletes who'll be racing at the World Championships in less than 2 weeks' time. Well, today, something a little different as we talk to one of the National Federation representatives, Chris.
Yes, it's going to be a really intriguing conversation. But before that, I must take the opportunity to brag about my partner, the rising star that is Professor Emma Martin. Just a few weeks ago, she made history as the first female lead commentator at the World Road and Para Championships in Zurich. Then she followed it up with the epic call of Mathieu van der Poel as he crossed the line in Leuven to win the Gravel Worlds. I want to pull back the curtain. What was the atmosphere like in the studio for that unforgettable moment, that call?
Well, Chris, I'm going red in the studio here. I have to tell you something, September and October have been phenomenal months for me. Like you say, calling the Paracycling World Road Championships in Zurich for 9 days. That was just absolutely phenomenal. And then partnering actually with my co-host on the Sunday Race Club and who will be my co-host for the e-cycling World Championships as well, Matt Payne. We worked together on the Gravel World Championships, and after he called Marianne Vos over the line on the women's race on the Saturday, the conversation in the studio was, it pretty much went like, if Mathieu van der Poel comes solo down the line tomorrow, I'm taking the call. Anybody else comes down the line, you can have it. And I called it right on the Saturday afternoon, and I got the absolute pleasure of calling it on the Sunday as well.
Well, it was really fabulous. I kind of feel like, as your partner, that I'm slightly associated with that, and it's a real honor to be that way. But speaking of World Championships, I want to just take us back to the UCI Cycling Esports World Championships last year in 2023. Denmark's Bjørn Andreassen won the race, soloed away, thrilling on that Zwift Glasgow crit circuit. The thing that struck me, because he was solo for so long, the camera was on him quite frequently, was that he was in a room with all of his national teammates around him, people with clipboards, and I'm sure that our guest was in the room also. Now, let's face it, it's not a mystery to anyone that I get frustrated by the federations that don't support cycling esports unless it meets their agenda in some way. So I contacted our guest to ask him a few questions, and I was really impressed by what I heard. And I appreciate that he's taken the time from his busy pre-World Championship schedule to share his insight on a federation that truly buys into cycling esports.
Well, indeed. Welcome to the Esports Director, Martin Hjørngaard, from the Danish Cycling Federation. Martin, it is fabulous to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you, Emma and Chris.
Oh, Chris, you're right. The men's defending world champion, Bjørn Andreassen, is indeed Danish. The Danish jerseys on that lead out for the first point section of the World Championship semi-final this year took everybody by surprise, but was absolutely phenomenal to see, Martin. And we will get to that later in this podcast. But first of all, tell us a little bit about how you got into cycling esports and how you got involved with the Danish Cycling Union.
Well, thank you, Emma, first of all. And that's where to start, right? So I got employed at the National Cycling Federation in 2018. So that's almost 7 years ago now. And about a few years after that, the UCI adopted cycling esports as an official cycling discipline. That meant we decided to look into opportunities, and so we applied for some funding, and we got it, and we set up a little project, not with me steering. After 9 months, the project leader stopped, and somebody had to, or somebody chose to grab on to whatever he had accomplished and lead it forward from there. And that's pretty much where the journey started. I found it funny, and it was an interesting way to approach cycling. I was living in Copenhagen, and it takes 45 minutes to get out of the city, 45 minutes to get back into the city. And if anybody were like me, somebody was like me, I don't want to train more than an hour and a half anyway. So the smart way to do it was in the basement, right? And as we saw COVID hit us, it just exploded even more. And we had a big community already in Denmark, and we started engaging with them. And it just built up step by step from there. pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're being a little bit modest because not only did you adopt cycling esports early on, but you also were extremely successful, right? We know that Anders Foldager and Nicholas Pedersen finished second and third in the inaugural Esports World Championships. What was it about esports that was appealing to the federation, and what influenced your decision to put so much support into it as the fledgling discipline that it was?
A few things. We had a commercial director at the union at that point who saw something in it commercially. He would bring this to the table when discussing partnerships with UNOX, among others. So it got to be a part of the deal with the partnership with UNOX that we would do some activities for community and elite on the Swift platform. At that point. And so we already had some funding, and it was a thing we had to engage in. When that happened, elite riders started to reach out to us as well, and we started reaching out to them. We saw that the World Championship was coming up, and we decided to why not do something, have some fun with it instead of just passively supporting the riders. I just jumped into that part. But it's a kind of a hobby thing. I'm not counting hours, let's just say that, because it wasn't a part of my original work description. So that's how it started anyway. The 2020 World Championships, it's a big story in itself, right? So we had 3 riders and we just went all in and tried to optimize. Denmark is a small country, so it was easier to have them transported to Copenhagen. And we had a good partner at that point in Copenhagen with good facilities, and they thought it would be great to host the Danish version of the World Championships. So we already had a good partner there, and we just tried looking into the rules, trying to optimize everything that we could, and it went pretty good.
It did. What does your work week look like as Cycling Esports Director?
I would say director, I don't call myself director. It's more like head of esports. I'm responsible for that discipline. My work week, it pretty much depends on the season, because in the summertime, I don't spend any time on cycling esports. Maybe a little correspondence with riders and maybe sponsors and partners and the UCI and early on Swift and now my Wish. It's not a big thing. But in the winter, 6 months, we have a rather long off season for mainly road riders. It's about half of my week. Half of my working hours I spent on cycling esports. So at the moment, the next thing is the Danish league. We both have a big community league and an elite league. That with a broadcast and commentators, and I'm pretty sure we'll have our first TV deal as well. So hopefully our elite league will be on national television as well.
I'm just going to put my jaw back in on.
Yeah,
that's phenomenal.
Well, yeah, it is phenomenal. Well, you are learning about it before anybody else. So let's see when this show is actually broadcasted. Nobody knows about it yet, but I'm pretty sure it will be finalized. It's a test deal with 2-3 events, and then we'll evaluate. But anyway, that's the big thing right now. And also, of course, supporting as well as I'm able to Michael Knudsen and Bjørn Andreassen in the process of getting ready for the World Championships. Yeah.
So we want to explore all of those exciting things in a little bit more depth later. But just to set the groundwork a little bit more, I want to get a sense of, you mentioned funding from the Federation. What kind of support and resources do you get from the DCU for cycling esports? And how is the Federation set up as far as human resources, particularly in terms of committees and staffing that support you in your work?
It's in the Danish Cycling Union Federation. I'm a development consultant, you can say, right? So we get 4-year fundings for defined strategies in a 4-year period. One of those strategies from 2022 to 2025 is cycling esports combined with some working and supporting the vet work in the Danish Sports Federation, the top of the umbrella. So we found out that work with veterans in regards to cycling, they could use cycling esport in many regards. So in regards to PTSD and so on. It worked very well for them. So we agreed to cooperate with them, with the veteran project. To do that, we had to get Cycling Esports up and running in general. So we got some general funding for this as well. Also, we argued that Cycling Esports is a very good way of maintaining the youth interest during the winter period in regards to staying in the clubs. We do a lot of work. That's the main part of my work, supporting clubs to recruit and maintain youth members. Cycling Esports is very good in the wintertime. If you recruit a 9-year-old to start cycling because they've seen Jonas Vingegaard win the Tour de France, you can easily destroy that little boy's dreams with sending him out on the road in the wintertime in Denmark. It's very useful in that regard as well. So that is pretty much how we got the main funding. And also we have some good partnerships with Garmin, among others, and UNOX until recently, supporting different activities with the federation. So that's pretty much how we got the funding. And that amounts to half of my time during the winter period. Also, we have a volunteer committee that works with me in developing Cycling Esports in the Danish Cycling Federation. It has 4 members, really qualified, resourceful people that spend a lot of time and a lot of resources helping me out. Likewise, try to help them out. So it's something we do together. And I can't, the volunteer part is just essential to making all of this work. They bring something to the table that money can't buy. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Martin, one of the things when I think about federations and cycling, I think about metrics because, how many riders do we have? How many races do we have? How many people are getting on bikes because of this initiative or this funding body? Esports is a little bit harder, I would think, and I'm going to defer to you, harder, I would think, than measuring metrics around the number of riders racing mountain bikes or the number of riders racing road, what their age category is, what their gender split is, how needing a racing, well, I don't know about Denmark, but in Britain, riders pay for a racing licence from British Cycling. So they know exactly how many people are racing and which discipline they're racing. And that also drives some of the funding into those disciplines because they can measure how many people are doing it. Esports has got to be hard because I don't know about Denmark, but you don't have to pay for a racing licence. You just jump on board and do it.
Absolutely right. It's been a big issue because really the Danish Cycling Federation, our members is our clubs and the club members of the clubs, right? So we have to work in their interest. They pay our salary, so we of course use our time supporting whatever they find interesting. So even though many of our members use Cycling Esports as a winter activity or maybe a full year activity, you can measure very well how many is using Cycling Esports. And more importantly, you can't measure if the clubs have any progress in memberships, get more members in the clubs, a consequence of the time we spend doing Cycling Esports activities. So how do you come about that? Because we also have it's part of our strategy is to get more members into the clubs. It's very difficult to do that with Cycling Esports because, as you say, people will just jump on their bike and they will log on to Zwift or MyWoosh or Indivelo or whatever. All activity is free to join, right? We tried many things to handle this. We tried with a Cycling Esports license. But still, what would that give access to, really? Because we cannot set up on MyWoosh and Zwift that you have to have a Cycling Esports license in Denmark to participate.
And you don't need the insurance that the license would give you on a mountain bike race.
No, true, yeah. But the fact is also that many of the people that are using Cycling Esports is already a member of a club. So it's all pretty muddy in that regard. So instead of this Cycling Esports license was never a success. We're still using it in the elite league for men and women that is broadcasted, and we spend a lot of resources on that. So we demand from the riders that they have esports license at a club, and we do the events with a private link, so nobody else is able to join, and that's okay. But it's still we're talking about 100 riders, maybe 150. So it doesn't provide any funding at all. So the funding comes from these partnerships and these strategic deals over a 4-year period.
So you mentioned those deals. Obviously the money has to come from somewhere. how do you frame or make cycling esports look appealing to a sponsor? What do you present to, when you're sitting in front of the table in front of a sponsor like UnoX or Garmin or, whatever company that you're presently pitching cycling esports to? What is the hook there?
Well, in regards to UnoX, they did very much for the cycling esport in Denmark. I think, well, I didn't actually make those partnership deals, but I've looked at them, and they wanted to be present online to some point. And they were highly engaged in cycling in general. And this was a great way of being first movers on a virtual cycling and being present on social media and so on. And also on our community league, we have about 1,500 unique riders. That's pretty good for a small country. And of course, they gained access. They were signed up to newsletters, and we could offer them different good deals were interesting for UnoX. Also, we broadcasted the Elite League. They had a very big space with logos and so on. It's also a lot up to them to activate their part of the deal. So they also had to be very active in promoting their engagement in Danish cycling esports. And they were very good at this. So they spent a lot of resources on different logo and graphics and so on. So it was a great partnership. Hopefully they gained off as well as we did. In regards to the funding, it's most of the strategic funding from the Sports Federation that funds activities.
You talked about, it's been great to hear the background and to see how the funding has come together and what you're actually doing with it. And you talked about a national esports cycling league and elite leagues as well. And you talked about them being sponsored and broadcast and potentially televised, which I think is really exciting. I'm going to keep my eye on that and see how that goes.
Great.
What about, and did I see a social media post telling people to save the date for the national championships for 2025?
Yeah, you did. So far, it's a Facebook event only. It has a place in general race calendar of the Cycling Federation as well. So it's February 1st. Not much more is publicly known. We're doing a big live event at a huge venue, and we're aiming for the biggest so far, maybe in the world, but you have to have high hopes and goals. So I can't say much more about it, but we're hoping. Have you ever seen darts?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're going with a bit of the dart atmosphere. Big light, what do you call it? Light cannon and disco music, smoke cannon maybe, and presenting one rider after the other. And so
you know what you need
everything
to watch?
is on the table. Yeah.
You need to watch the Cycle Ball World Championships because they go with exactly the same feel. When the riders come in, the music starts blaring, the lights start flashing, and then the game starts.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that. It's
Will.
brilliant.
Yeah.
It really gets the crowd going, which is exactly what you want, isn't it?
It is, because we have to offer to get a crowd, we have to offer them more than just a race, right? We have to offer them an experience, something they haven't had before, and something that they'll remember. We're trying to put that together, and hopefully it'll be as big as we hope. So if you're in Denmark in February, which I can't recommend really, but if you are, then please come.
Well, I hope that you hit the bullseye with that one, Martin. But anyway,
yeah, me too.
I think that a lot of people that are fans of cycling esports, they see the racers going to the World Championships representing their countries, and they just assume that those athletes are on their national teams. But for most of the federations, they're not actually national team members. Can you describe the approach that the Danish cycling uses? Are your World Championship riders in the semifinals? Are they all members of your national team? What kind of support do you provide them? Kits, equipment, coaching? Just give us a level of the commitment that's actually given to the athletes that are in these international events.
Okay, I'll try. Because a national team is pretty much something you just decide. So we decide we want to have a national team. And luckily, the Danish Cycling Federation can't make these decisions. We just made the decision. It's not more formal than that. This year is a bit different than earlier years, because with my bush, we don't have so many active riders yet. But early on, we had a national team squad with a lot of riders, and we narrowed it in to the riders that actually got drafted in the end. And of course, we have some demands that we demand something of them, right? We demand engagement, and most importantly, we demand that they act as a team. It's about winning the World Championships. It's not about them winning the World Championship. Denmark has to win, and it pretty much it doesn't matter who wins. And so we try to get a bit of a team spirit as well, as you probably saw in the World Championship. So this year it's been a little more of an online process. We weren't together, the national team this year, but I tried to support it online virtually. So it started, of course, many weeks before with the planning and the tactics and the training. And of course, we were sending them also equipment jerseys, which they borrow. It's quite expensive. So that's the best we could do. That they could borrow national kits, but of course, if you're on the national team, you have to have the national kit as well. And by the way, it's like that for every discipline in Denmark. You only borrow the kit; you don't get to keep it. That's how it started, anyway. So
so you mentioned, didn't you, that in terms of the numbers you had previously when the World Championships were on Zwift, you had big numbers. Then you have less riders. How is that transition going for you and the athletes? Because obviously the next 3 are going to be on My Whoosh.
Yeah.
You have 2 very strong athletes who have gone through.
We have,
One has been on My Whoosh for a long period of time, and the other who is slightly newer.
The transition is going slowly, I would say. People are conservative, and I am as well. It's just doing what you've always been doing, and what many of our riders has used many years on fine tuning how they ride on the Zwift platform. So it's been a bit difficult with the transition, but that's okay as well. Things take time. We were lucky to have 11 spots on the men's team, and we decided we got to use them all. We cannot just use 5 or 6 spots. Let's use them all and find a good way to use these spots. So we had a lot of talks with some really strong riders who had no experience with My Whoosh, and we made a plan to how to approach the semifinals. Pretty much we had 6, 7 just helping riders. I don't know what that's called, with very clear instructions on how to ride the races, and they knew what their job was, and they were excited to try and give Bjørn and Michael, which was our main stars, best possible opportunities to qualify. And of course, we hoped that a few more would qualify, but it was close, but it didn't happen.
I just love the fact you treated it like a road squad. It was brilliant. When I opened the show, I said those Danish jerseys came to the front. Honestly, in the studio commentating, I was a bit like, didn't see that coming. It was just fabulous.
It was great, and we talked a lot about it, and we tried it. We had in the weeks coming up to the World Championships, we had time on the My Whoosh server on the routes, and we talked it over how to do it. And we also talked about that it may not work at all. It may not have any effect. It's not fun not to try, right? So we agreed that we wanted to give it all and try to do something that nobody else would maybe do, and just hope that it had some effect. And even if it didn't have any effect, at least we tried and we had fun trying, right? And we wouldn't sit here looking back and wish that we had done something. So I'm glad that you actually noticed. Unfortunately, I think maybe it was the route. It wasn't suited for a collective attack going slightly downhill. But I was very happy to hear your podcast with Lionel Boyachin early on, where he said that he was surprised and he reached the bottom of the hill with high pulse, and he'd been riding 7 watts per kilo the entire time, just getting there. And he was having a hard time at the bottom. So it must have worked to some extent. That's how we did it. And if you treat riders like they're on a squad, because they are, I think they act like they're on a squad, and they had a great time. And that's my feeling.
Well, and it certainly was successful. If you say that Michael and Bjørn were your key rider, they went through to the final. And we know that live event final is going to be in Abu Dhabi, where Bjørn's going to defend his title, and Michael has a great shot also. What are your thoughts on the live event final being in Abu Dhabi and sending your national team athletes there to represent your country? As you've mentioned a number of times, it's not an I situation here now. This is a we situation. We are Denmark. We are winning the World Championships for our country. How do you feel about this change in the format going forward?
I applaud very much that My Whoosh is investing in this kind of change. It's definitely the right way to go if you want to continue developing cycling esports and the World Championships. And they invest in it heavily. So I applaud that. It also creates some new situations for the federations, right? Because in Denmark, anyway, the national team doesn't consist of 2 riders. We have a national coach, which is me. It's not an official title, but I try to run the national team as a coach would do. The previous years, we had many assistants and helpers, people around the national team to help them perform the best way possible. Not only on the day and the day coming up to it, but weeks coming up to it. There's a lot of planning and there's a lot of information. There's a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of things to remember. And really, we just want to have the athlete focus on performing, because if it's a mutual building up thing, I would say, because it also raises tension and the riders in a good way when we are supporting them like we are. I think they want to give it even more, knowing that we are also using many resources on them to perform. Now it's only Bjørn and Michael in Abu Dhabi, and that's I would love to have come there. And I know the two of you are going to be down there as well. It would have been great to meet you in person. But really, I would have loved to have been down there with me and maybe an assistant more to try and optimize everything around the riders so that they would have an even bigger chance of winning. Things have to start somewhere, and I really appreciate what MyWhoosh is doing. It's definitely raising the game to a new level. I fully understand that you can't do everything in the first year. Hopefully next year there will be a little more focus on the national team as a team with not only riders on it. But again, if the Danish Cycling Federation is there's only a few national federations who are approaching cycling esports like this, I can understand that it doesn't have the biggest focus to have national federations present, maybe. Yeah.
I can sense how difficult this conversation is for you, Martin, because at the basis of cycling esports, we feel that the federations are a strong part of it. And the way that it's constructed now, you're basically being cut off at the knee. You're not there to support your athletes, so you're not there to buy in to the thing that we want you to buy into. So it's like a contradiction. I can certainly see that.
Yeah.
And I get the sense that you feel very strongly that cycling esports at the elite level should involve the federations. What is your future vision as far as that's concerned for the World Championships, international competitions, what you have going on in Denmark, and the future of the sport?
That's a big question. Obviously, I feel like you do. I hope more national federations will engage more. I'm also thinking about what does it take to get them to engage more, and I'm not sure that I have the answer, because you have to know which role federations have in cycling esports, and I guess the only one to define that role is the UCI. What does the UCI expect of national federations in regards to national team competitions, which only includes the World Championship so far? I'm not sure. I know you have Jacob on in one of the future episodes, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing that episode and also to speak with Jacob in the future about these things, because it would be great, in my view, to cycling esports going forward to have more federations engaged. Right now, the Danish Federation is just, we don't have to do what we're doing, but we do it because even though not many federations is doing it. But I would love to have more clear frame of what is expected of the national federations, or even what the UCI and whatever platform UCI is working with, how can they support national federations? Because it's also difficult to do national team sports when there are only one single event each year, right? It's hard to prioritize it in a big sense, because it's only the World Championships, maybe a month and a half, or 2 months, or something like that. Hopefully there will be more national team activities. And I know Matt Smithson said that as well. You asked him what he would have done differently. He said, or what he would do different next year. He said he would start the talks and engaged with the national federations at an earlier level, which I think is great. I'm looking very much forward to that.
Well, I'm hoping, Martin, we can answer some of those questions with Jacob for you.
Great. I'll write you a list.
I see you're going to be typing me a little list.
Oh yeah, I'm already started.
Just we've talked about the World Champs a bit, and we've talked about the shift from Zwift to MyWhoosh, etc. What about, there is something else in the offing, which is the Olympic Esports Games.
Yeah.
That has been announced for the next 12 years. And e-cycling is going to be part of that. Is that a game changer, do you think?
It's a game changer, I hope, because now it's not only the UCI, but also the IOC that could be approaching national federations with something to offer. In Denmark, much funding comes from pretty much only Olympic discipline is funded by the Danish Sports Federation. It will be very exciting to see how this esports Olympics is regarded by the national Olympic committees and IOC as well. Is it something that they see on height with the normal Olympics? Of course, it won't be at starters at least, but is it something that they will invest in if the national federations are willing to invest as well. So it could potentially be a game changer because much funding comes from Olympic disciplines. So I'm looking very much forward to those talks, but we don't have any answers yet into that. But at least now we have 2 major events, right, each year, and hopefully, and that'll make a big difference. I guess it'll also make talks easier with the riders. Now there's both Olympics and World Championships to relate to, and hopefully more riders will prioritize the national team.
I do think it is an exciting thing, isn't it? And it's, as you say, Olympic funding follows Olympic medals, doesn't it? And
It does,
once upon a time, the Winter Olympics wasn't as highly regarded as the Summer Olympics, but now they're on an equal level. You know, Olympic esports could, well, you'd like to think, wouldn't you, in 10 years' time, we just see 3 different Olympic models.
I hope, yeah. I hope very much. So I'm looking forward to it. I guess within the next few months we'll know more. Last thing I heard was that it would be in November 2025, and of course in Saudi Arabia. So I'm looking forward to getting that confirmation on that as well. And also looking forward to learning about when the World Championship would be. Matt mentioned that it may not have been an ideal time of the year to host it. Turning back to an earlier question, also made it difficult for us. You mentioned Anders Forlager. He's on the World Tour team right now, and it doesn't fit his calendar. It's hard to find the perfect spot, right? I'm looking forward to seeing when it would be in the future.
Well, we certainly intend on asking Jake from the UCI that specific question. And the IOC General Council is going to be voting on whether cycling esports and the other sports that would potentially be in the Olympic esports games in December. So we'll be watching that really closely, as I know that you will also, Martin. Your insight has been really incredible today. And Emma and I, our mission is to move the sport forward, having impactful guests that have different perspectives on things. Your perspective is extremely valuable, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do indeed, Martin. Thank you so much for joining us today. And a fabulous place, I think, to draw a line on today's conversation. So that leads me to say thank you very much to our guest today, Martin Hjørngaard from the Danish Cycling Union. It's been fabulous to talk to you today on the Virtual Velo Podcast. If you want to know more, you can like, follow or subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or your favourite podcast provider. You can subscribe to the Zommunique website or follow the Zommunique on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram as well at biking_Emma about all that we are getting up to. And of course, we will be on the ground, Chris and I, at the e-cycling World Championships in Abu Dhabi. We will also be back before then with the Virtual Velo Podcast, where we are going to be joined by UCI Cycling Esports consultant Jacob Fraser. Until then, stay safe, enjoy your riding. Goodbye.